Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last Prasada Talks of the year. Not forever. We fully intend on continuing them in 2023. But this is our last one of the year. It's December 1st. Happy final month of the year. And our topic, our word of the month, our theme to explore is this word connect. Before we get too into that, just in case you don't know us, I'm Meg Townsend. I'm a whole being guide with Prasada. Who are you?
I who am I? Who am I
Who
today?
are you? Who are
I'm
you?
Alice. I'm Alice Dommert. I'm the founder and CEO of Prasada, and I feel a little discombobulated today. Meg and I are both packing. We are heading to Costa Rica tomorrow for a trip that was supposed to happen in May of 2020. So I'm glad to be talking about connecting and feel like I'm a little octopus pulling all the things and pieces and parts together for that trip. So super excited. If any of you are joining us today that are going on that trip, we will see you soon.
Yes. So welcome. So Alice, I wanted to start. I'm glad that we are unpacking this topic. I wanted to kind of just start our session by going to the dictionary and defining the word connect. So Kate is leading a connect yoga class on December 12th. I'll put the link at the end of this in for that. Please join us for that. But when I introduced the topic to Kate, she wrote back to me and she said, "Now, what do you mean by connect?" And she listed a whole bunch of different options. And I said, yes, all of those. And whatever really inspires you, whatever wants to come out, because there are so many definitions and ways that we can look at connect. So here's some of just the regular basic definitions from the dictionary. Connect: to join, link, fasten together, unite, or bind. To establish communication between. To cause to be associated, as in a personal or a business relationship. To associate mentally or emotionally. And then another one, to link to an electrical or communications system, which kind of relates to what we one of the talking points that we're gonna start with. And maybe let's start there. Just this piece of connection. And we're thinking a lot about 2020 right now because we're going to Costa Rica and we've been waiting to go since we had to cancel it in 2020. And um what but their connection was a huge theme that you know was at the forefront when we all of a sudden, and I'm not speaking for everyone, we all had very different lived experiences. Some people had to work more and were out in the world, and some people had to quarantine and stay inside and weren't able to kind of connect in different ways. So when you were writing and talking about this a lot at that time, like just technology and connection, and how COVID presented opportunities for us to explore how we could connect in different ways.
Yeah, yeah. If you're joining us on the Zoom, feel free to pop into the chat what you would think of when the word connect comes up. Yeah, it was interesting because we have always been a virtual company. So it didn't really change kind of how we worked together, but we weren't able to go to the sites where our clients were. So that was a big change for all of us. And yeah, at Prasada, we've talked a lot about this idea that we live in three worlds. And we live in this world of our mind. And so I think one of the big things that happened during COVID was for some people, they were so happy to not have the busyness and moving around, which gave more time, more downtime. Maybe that was the introverts, and maybe a little bit more time to sort of check in with yourself. Um, I definitely feel like the introvert in me was able to come out a little bit more and got some space. So that was the experience of just, how do we connect with ourselves and how do we have time for that? A lot of times we're so busy dealing with the outer world that we're not really kind of checking in and seeing where we are. Um, for other people, that time at home without all the distractions was pretty hard because suddenly all those things that we were distracted by weren't really around, and we had a little bit more time to hear a lot of those little inner voices that can sometimes not be very kind to us. So people had different different experiences. And I know that it felt like on our team, we sort of went through the roller coaster. We were checking in a lot more often than we had before. And I don't know if you remember, Meg, but it was also interesting because we used to have weekly meetings where we just call each other. And then suddenly during COVID, we decided that we wanted to be on Zoom and we wanted to see each other. And our team meetings kind of changed a little bit when
Yeah.
we were actually able to see each other. It felt like we were connecting more because sometimes we'll tell a joke and if people are quiet, you can't really tell, are they getting the joke? Are they in on it? Are they thinking it's funny? Are they thinking are they just annoyed? And that way we could sort of see people. When you think about that sort of mind piece of the beginning of COVID, what was that like for you? How did it affect connection for you?
Well, it was an interesting juncture in my life because I had just come back from a month in India. And then like
Oh, that's right.
a week after, so I was in India doing some pretty heavy practice and, lots of silence, lots of internal connection. And I came back and, within a week, it was like, and now you will no longer work for 2 months. And I was just like, so there was obviously some major fear come up, but in the realm of my internal connection, the groundwork had just already been laid through my practice in India. So I was, felt pretty steady and then could be sort of a, a brighter voice for people who were freaking out. And so
Yeah.
I made an intention of I'm going to leverage Facebook Live and all of these tools. And I just, started offering kind of like free chanting sessions if that felt good to people, or would come on and read and just like offer things to give a valuable distraction to really acknowledge the moment that we were in and just offer the tools that I had to support people in connecting, reflecting, slowing down, breathing, because it was very intense and on
Yeah.
so many levels.
Well, and we think, most of the time, when I think of the word connect, I think of the word of connecting with somebody else, another person.
You're
And
very good at that. Alice is like, I mean, that's why I work at Prasada, is because my friend walked his dog. And then all of a
that's
sudden,
true.
some
That's
connection. And
true.
it's like everyone who's on the team somehow has connected
Has
somehow.
been,
Yeah.
yes, yes. I know people ask me, they're like, how do you find the people on your team? I'm like, they sort of like come. They're these little threads that sort of
Yeah.
bring
It's one of
people
your gifts.
to us. But this idea that like, yes, we are constantly sort of connecting with other people, but this idea of like, how do we connect with ourselves and the value of that?
Yeah.
Because, at the end of the day, you really are the only person that's left with you. And so this idea that, that is a really valuable thing. We think about, I think a lot about in different countries are identifying loneliness as really an epidemic. And there are a lot of countries where there's a European country where they're actually sending the firefighters and emergency workers when they're not on duty to go visit the elderly. And
Mm.
so we are, as human beings, we are sort of programmed to be in groups, to sort of want to be in the company of other people.
Yeah.
But yet, oftentimes, that connection, that relationship is informed by the connection, the relationship that we have with self. So it's one of the things that we talk a lot about in Prasada is like, what is the mind doing? What are those little voices saying? What is the relationship that you have with the voices? Are you the thoughts that you hear all the time? And what is that connection? Um, we also think about connection in terms of, I was doing a program last week with a woman who's a therapist, and her name's Adele LaFrance. And she's from Canada, and she was talking about we really have two emotions. It's either yum, where we want to move towards something, or yuck. And so I've been thinking a lot about that. Yum is when you see somebody and they're a friend, or you recognize them, or you're knowing you're going to have a conversation. And so that drawing toward each other, most of us were raring to get back to the social things by the time we could when COVID happened. So you think that if we were programmed to be hermits, we all would have been totally happy and no one would have left their house. So we are programmed to sort of work in the group culture. What were the things that you feel like you missed the most? What were the connection things that you feel like you missed the most when COVID was happening in the
Yeah,
lockdown?
Well, I had a unique experience where I lived with friends at that point. I lived in more of like a little communal setting. So it was my partner, me, and my two girlfriends and one of their boyfriends. We just were a little automatic. Like we got very used to seeing each other's faces because we acknowledged we were already so many people that we couldn't see other people. And
Yeah.
so it's just us in that house. So I was never like without a person, which was lovely. And it wasn't until I moved out about a year later and lived by myself, then I really had that time to be with me
Yeah.
and in that quiet and in that like all the emotions that I may not have been listening to or could have easily distracted by just, finding a friend downstairs.
Yeah, and it was very different. I mean, for a lot of families, it was really hard at the beginning, having all that time together. And then how do you, when you're spending all that time? I mean, one of the things that I've noticed about connection is, when you're in relationships with people, you are together and you have sort of a shared experience, and then you separate and you go and do other things, and then you come back. And at one point, I remember my daughter saying, I was saying, she was in touch with her friends at the beginning, but then no one was doing anything. So they kind of felt like they had nothing to
Yeah.
talk about
Yes.
because no one was able to go and do this other thing that you then bring back to the relationship and say, hey, I did this or I did that. So it was really hard for the families that had to be together because there was really no new activities coming in, and you were just kind of stuck, um, in that scenario. So it was just really interesting. I think it's going to take us decades before we finally, as we start to get further and further
Yes.
away from the experience, to sort of really see what were I call them the wisdom lessons that kind of came from that.
Mhm.
We also talk about the sort of relationship, the connection that you have with your body, because at Prasada, when we talk about these three worlds, we talk about the relationship and connection with self, relationship and connection in the world of the body. Everybody's body is a different geography, a different landscape. And so we have a different, how connected are you in with the signals your body is giving you?
Mm.
Are you, I mean, I was the queen of Diet Coke for many years, and I loved my 330 Diet Coke with the little bubbles, and that would give me that burst of energy, to get through the afternoon when my kids were little, and then get through dinner, and then get through baths and get them to bed, and then work for another 2 hours. But at some point, I realized caffeine was sort of like borrowed energy.
Mm. Yeah.
So, we have, and I didn't like feeling tired. Somehow feeling tired meant I was somehow incompetent. Versus this realization that, like, when our body's giving us signals and clues and cues, how can we actually respond to those things to sort of, it's a system, it's a chemistry system. And if we're not kind of paying attention, we can kind
How
of
do
get
we,
lost in it.
yeah, how do we listen and respond so the signals don't get louder and louder and more serious? And
I mean,
yeah.
it's the reason why our medical system is just oriented toward, when we get to the point where we've got not just dis-ease, meaning discomfort, but when we really are in, bad situations. And so, it's one of the things that, if we can be more in tune, it's one of the things that I've loved about our whoop bands that we use, is that we always talk about it's like a ways for your health, because the whoop band is measuring your sleep and your strain, and it gives you, it will start to tell you there's some things that you're like, oh, I felt pretty good this morning, but my whoop band said I'm not really that well rested. It's like giving you the clue that there's an accident up
Mhm.
3 miles in traffic. So kind of how do we have that connection? And then the third world that we talk about is the world of the outer world. That's other people, it's the environment that we're in. And the environment can be the physical environment, the space that you're in, the temperature, the light, the chair, the desk, all those types of things. But it's also the like the culture that you're in when you're in a workplace. And we were talking the other day with some other colleagues, who were over at, Karen Treatment Center, and we were talking about this whole idea of when people going back to work, and like, what did we miss not being in work, and why is it that law firms in particular are wanting people to go back to work? And we were really talking about how, you know When you're emailing people back and forth, you're just getting a particular message that you're sharing.
Mhm.
It's business. You're not hearing the periphery things. You're not talking about your dog. You're not talking about those other things. You're not overhearing somebody else or asking a question. It's all those sort of periphery things that happen within people being in a proximity to each other. And so, especially for younger attorneys, not really getting that mentoring. So that is something that we've missed. Were we all still efficient? Were we all still connected to where we could trade tasks and do those kinds of things? Yes, but we really missed something, in that proximity to each other.
Yeah, and the deeper, and that comes too with workplaces that are all virtual. Like we will always be mostly virtual. And something I've learned about myself is that I really thrive on connection with the team and with you. And so I've looked for how can I, and this is a big goal for 2023, how can I, make time, even if there's not a project, to connect with people, because we both, or all, whoever's there, if it's just a one-on-one with the teacher, or our whole hive, we call it, um everybody feels better after that because there's just a good energy about that. So I'm looking to not just send the emails about the projects, but sometimes I'll send a voice message too. Like I'll voice message Tracy and she'll voice message me back. And it's like, it's great to hear your voice. So just different
Yeah.
ways to connect beyond the blase email are can fill you up, right? And make the work experience more fulfilling. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, if anybody had asked us before COVID, like, oh, you guys are going to all be online and, are you going to feel connected? We all would have said, of course not. Like, we can't do that. But yet, we have been able to use the tools to be connected. And it really is an intention in terms of how you do business, how you have relationships. And this idea that when you make time to really support the whole person, and this is really kind of the core of our whole being, we do check-ins in our team meetings, we do check-ins in all of our programs, and the first thing we do is just like everybody gets there, everybody arrives. We don't just jump right into business. We are trying to say, like, how are you doing today? And I remember especially at the beginning of COVID, like each one of us, like each week there was somebody who was like, whatever had happened, because there were just so many things that happened, and we really were vulnerable and we really shared with each other, and that kept us feeling connected, that kept us working, that kept us that support system. I think a lot of organizations and people look at, like, well, that takes more time. And I certainly remember a time in my life where I was like, I remember a friend saying, like, we should get together once a month. And I was thinking, well, I don't have 4 hours once a month to get together with you. I'm busy. And
Mhm.
not really valuing. So, while it is more time, the way that cultures work, and especially if we start thinking about employee engagement, it's those relationships, it's those connections. It's me learning what your strengths are. It's me learning about your life. It's me learning that, like, us talking about a project and me somewhat knowing what your tasks are. So if something happens, and you can't do those tasks, we can be interdependent. We can sort of trade off. And I think that's something that is very different in the way people are working. That it used to be, you have these tasks and you have these tasks and you have these tasks, and we weren't connected enough to be able to say, oh my gosh, my dog has to go to the vet this morning, I'm not going to be able to, and the other person not even have to ask, but somebody say, hey, I can do that.
Mhm.
So, tools like Slack and tools like the Google Meet and all those other kinds of things have really provided us with much better communication lines to where we can really be staying in touch with each other. And it provides a richer working environment, because that's what they say, is that people don't leave their jobs because of a lack of money. Most of the time, it's not about the money. And a lot of times, it's not even about the direct relationship with their supervisor. They want to get some feedback and support from their supervisor, but it's really about the relationship with their coworkers, and
Mm.
that people are really understanding each other, supporting each other, learning together, growing together. And that's really what makes the difference in the companies that really have high levels of employee engagement, which is not just people are healthier, but they're also more passionate about their work. They feel like it's purpose. And they also feel really passionate about their organization.
Yeah.
And that's one of the interesting things too when you look at the studies. People people got more productive, people were more passionate about their work because they wanted their organizations to survive,
Yeah.
when COVID came around.
So Alice, tell me this though. I love this picture that you've painted. And one thing that popped into my head though is like, what if there's someone you just that like gets under your skin, or you're like irks you sometimes, or annoys you? Any
Oh, that
any
not
thoughts
that
about
never
that?
I've never had that.
Any thoughts about any thoughts about that? And I'm not speaking from experience. We have a divine team. I love them, but
Yes.
that is not the case. That we've heard this in workplace, like, oh, I don't know if I want to like connect in this way with this person because we just don't jive. So what's recognizing that that is absolutely valid and a thing, but what's a way that you might navigate that?
Yeah. So it's interesting because when my daughter was in high school, she was in a student-run theater group. And, a lot of times we will tell teenagers, like, well, wait till you get to the real world. But they were having some stuff going on. And I said, this is great because there will always be that person who annoys you. So these are just life lessons. I think the biggest thing that that we have found, that I have found, we do programs that are related to the VIA character strengths, and this is really based in positive psychology, and it's really looking at what are the innate things that I do that are my superpowers. So I have one of mine is creativity, love of learning, appreciation of beauty and excellence.
Please share that one.
We share that one, yes. And there are 24 of them, and there are some of them that I don't really possess. So oftentimes I'm totally jamming with the people who have the same ones as I have, and I feel like, oh, they get me. But the person who's got maybe uh, uh, social intelligence, I mean, sometimes I'm not the greatest with that one because I just want to get the thing done. Or somebody who has what's the other one? Prudence.
Mhm.
So the challenge in the strengths program is, can you try to identify the strength of the other person? And as you get more familiar with these, you can take this test. It's the VIA character strengths. It's
I'll
like a
find the
free,
link and put it in
yeah,
the
Meg will put, it's a free online assessment. You go via character strengths, and you get what your top ones are. But most of the time, what I have realized is that when I'm annoyed with somebody else, they have a very different, and sometimes you might even think opposite strength. And so I'm wanting to make a decision about closing a retreat, and someone else is really trying to see if there's a person that can work in. And that other person that I'm getting frustrated with might be having a much higher level of kindness and empathy and social intelligence. And I'm really about kind of like getting the work done and that kind of thing. So that has been super helpful for me, is to just take a step back and say, what strength are they using right now
Hmm.
that is really valuable? And that has certainly happened on our team. As we have learned about each other's strengths, we have learned much. We're so much better at recognizing, like, okay, if we've got a system, and we want to come up with an idea, brainstorm something. Some of the people on our team love to do that, make a decision right away. Other people need a little bit more time. I like to get a decision. So how can we work on something that can really work for everybody? So I think
I,
that appreciation has helped a lot.
I love that. And I feel like this also, we're talking about the workplace, but this can apply to the month that we're going into, right? There's many different holidays that we're
Yes.
coming up on. And we're spending more time with friends, maybe coworkers and holiday parties, family for sure. There's always usually sometimes the family member that might like get under your skin. Or
Yes.
there's this great quote by I'm terrible at remembering exactly who says, but some yogi or meditator said, like, if you think you're enlightened, spend a day with your family. It stirs up all the things. So I'm going to take this remembrance of what are their strengths, right? What can I kind of acknowledge and look at what are their strengths? Do I have those? Because we're inherently, you know, linked by DNA or life conditioning or whatever. What are their strengths, and how I can remember that even in the times when I'm feeling a little poked.
I think the other thing about going into the holidays is really thinking about what are our expectations.
Hmm.
if the expectation is that you're going to want to see your family and you're going to want them to be, fawning over you and telling you how wonderful you are, you might be disappointed. If the point is to connect, then is there equal amount of you offering information and sharing what's happening with you, and then you also asking questions?
Mm.
I just was listening to a podcast. It was Oprah and Pima Chodron, and somehow it came up about like getting together with your family or your parents or something. And Pima Chodron said, it's really been so valuable for her to really ask her mother about her childhood.
Mm.
And so we have so many family stories. And I know that at the beginning of COVID, my kids' dad and I were telling them some of our family stories of resilience that we hadn't shared before. They weren't any sort of big secret things, but they just weren't the kind of thing that as a family we had talked about. So I think that one of the opportunities in the holidays, if the intention really is to go and to connect, is to ask people, how are you? Some people are going to be more forthcoming and say, I'm feeling really great. Some people are just going to say fine. But we can always say, what was your favorite memory of Christmas for you, or whatever holiday it is that you celebrate? What was it like? Does anyone remember their 13th birthday? And it's nice sometimes when we get around a table instead of just letting the conversation go, because sometimes it goes to
Wild.
crazy places. I know Nicole Stottlemyre on our team is just so great. She always has some sort of question, one or two questions when she gets together with her family. And it really does focus, and everybody's wanting to connect. If you didn't come to the event, I mean, sometimes you're just like, it is a family obligation. I think one of the things about COVID is we've eliminated some of those things, and now we're doing the ones that are intentional, but we want to have an inner world connection with people. We don't want to just talk about, it's fine to talk about the favorite football team for a little while or kind of what you've been doing, but we want to connect on that inner level. So asking questions and being curious about other people and what their lives are and what their life experience has been. And, people will change the subject if they don't want to answer that question. But I really liked that sort of guidance about getting together with our families.
I love that. That inspires me because I'll be writing some of the newsletters later in the month, is that one of those newsletters will probably have some of those questions. I'm going to reach out to Nicole and the other good question askers and just say, give me some ideas that we can give to our readers of what do we ask? How do we connect more with people? Just in a way that feels comfortable. And yeah.
I think the other thing Nicole has done is she's done some strength spotting, like with families, because the,
I
the
love
cool
that.
thing about, yeah, the cool thing about strength spotting, I mean, is when you sort of look at the strengths, a lot of times you don't know that's a strength of yours. So when the
Mm.
whole family says, okay, we're going to get to Meg, like what are the strengths that we know about Meg? Like, well, she's always really creative. She always has the coolest earrings and the really a sweater that matches. And you might just be like, well, of course that's what I do. So that's another, easy one. Again, as sort of a family activity to kind of bring people. And those are the things that people remember. They really.
Like that. I know,
Those are,
rather than like sit down and roast each other, some
yeah,
families do that. Maybe let's not roast each other because it's funny sometimes, but it always leaves a little sting.
exactly. And then you go home and you're like, why did I spend the whole time talking about everybody who wasn't there? Wait a second, they must be talking about me when I'm not there. Like, oh, this is not something I want to keep have as a legacy. So.
I love that. And it all starts with like, every family, every workplace, everything has its own culture. So it might just be a little drop that you add to kind of shift the conversation to more of a conscious, positive connection. And, it might go unnoticed or unappreciated, but hopefully it feels good within you that you did, started something to shift the culture and the way that people connect.
Well, and another strategy is just to decide you're going to have the intention to be a good listener this year.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be a good listener.
I love it. Well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. Good crew here today. It was lovely to have your presence. And somebody shared, I love this. My dog helped me see when I needed to go, when we were talking about listening to, signals from our body or around us.
Yeah.
Dog's ready for bed at 9 p.m. No matter what's going on, I learned to unplug when I put it to bed. Beautiful. Good connection with nature's wisdom via your dog. And yes, Lisa,
Yes.
we will give our love to Costa Rica. So
Yes.
I'll be back in a week. Kate Howell will be teaching on the 12th of December, Monday night, a free yoga class all around Connect. I put the link in the chat in case you're not registered. Please join her for that. And we'll see you all again very, very soon. In the new year, we've got more exciting programming coming. So just keep your eyes peeled and reach out if you need to connect with us and need, support or, have any questions. We are here.
Yeah.
You can email me at meg@prasadawholebeing.com.
Yeah, and stay tuned. We haven't really talked about this too publicly yet, but we are really launching our Prasada U, and we're going to have a new membership, Prasada U membership, that we're going to be kicking off at the beginning of the year that we've been working hard on. Really trying to, again, connect more with you guys. So thank you so
More
much.
with you all and more with each other, because there's an amazing community of people. So we'd love to provide opportunities where it's not just a one-way webinar. We love these, but where we can all sit around a Zoom room or even a room together eventually and connect as a part of that Prasada community. Okay, we could talk forever,
All right.
so we'll stop. I got to go
Thanks,
pack.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care and please be well.
Bye-bye.